Hello everyone, Wisp the Fox here, developer of the Universes plugin. Today I'm going to be starting a short series. It's probably going to be only just the 2 episodes on using databases with Java, namely MySQL and Sql. So I'm going to be starting off with Sql because it's a little bit. They're both pretty much the same. So once you know how to do one of them, you can do the other one pretty easily. It's just a matter of changing how you initially set it up. So I'm going to be going over, in this one, setting up for SQL and using SQL. The command syntax used for queries is the same as in both SQL and MySQL, so you don't have to worry about differences there. So it should be easy to transition between the two. I need to create the packages. I don't know why I didn't create them automatically. Okay, so to start, we need to do a few things you can download the jars and just add them to the class path. That's a way you can do it. I've gotten more accustomed to using project compilers like Maven and Gradle, because in a professional setting, we're going to see more of this kind of a thing as opposed to just the jars added as libraries to the class path. I'm going to add a little bit to this. So I'm just gonna copy this build section from my example. My assumption when starting this is that you will already know how to use Maven, and how to set up projects with Maven. So what I've added here essentially is just adding in the Maven compiler plugin to the plugins list, and then adding in the assembly plugin, which will allow me to create a jar file with all the dependencies compiled into it, so that things work correctly. So I'm not going to go over what all that is. That was just a quick brief thing. So if we're working with SQLite, we need to add a couple dependencies, or actually one dependency. So we're going to add the dependency. It is the group ID is org.xeril, basically serial with an X, and the artifact ID is SQLite-JDBC. And we also need to add in a version line. The version is 3.34. I don't know if 0.1 is available yet with this. No, okay. Oops. Okay, so it is 0.0. So it's 3.34.0 is the current version. That's all we really need, so now I can... Oh. What? I don't know what I was trying to refactor. Okay, so using SQL, the biggest consideration you need to make when you're working with SQL versus MySQL is how you establish connections to the database. So when you're using MySQL, you can have multiple connections at one time to the database. So if you don't close a connection, if you don't close the connection, you can open a new connection and work with the database, and you won't run into trouble. It's always good to close a connection when you're done working with the database, but if you forget, you can still make other connections and work with the database, and also connections will time out. With SQL, since those databases are held locally on the machine, only one connection can be made at a time, and connections don't time out. So if you forget to close a connection, you're in trouble because you're not going to be able to use the database anymore until that connection is closed. So I'm going to create a class here. I'm just going to call it SQLite util, and it's going to be a simple class. I'm going to do most of the stuff in the main, so I'm going to create a variable here, private connection, and then I'm going to create a class to connect to the database. So public boolean connect, and we're going to put all this in a try catch. The exception we're going to catch is an SQL exception. And so we're going to get the exception, print the message, and the stack trace. And now what we're going to do here is we're going to be establishing the connection. So if connection is null, or the connection is closed, we're going to do class.forName, and it is org.sqlite.jdbc. Now that is case sensitive. And connection is equal to driver manager.get connection. And this is going to be jdbc : SQLite : and the name of the database. So I'm going to just call this example.db. I forgot, there's one more I need to catch. IO exception. This will just do new system.error.println e.get message. Whoops. Right. And e.print stack trace. Okay. So basically, if this part is successful, we're going to return true. What? Oh, wrong exception. It's class not found exception. So if it's successful or the connection is still open, then we're going to return true because the connection is open. Otherwise, if we run into either of these two cases, we're going to return false. Now, this is appearing yellow because these two errors have the same exact catch block. I think there's a way you can have in the catch thing here have multiple different exceptions that it checks for, but I don't remember how to do that. So, and the other thing we need is a close connection method. So this one is also going to be public void close. So we're going to put a try catch here as well. And this one we just need to catch an SQL exception. And it's going to be the same thing. So what we do here is if connection is not equal to null, or not connection that is closed, connection dot close. Okay, so we have this. We go over to here and we can use it. So let me just click static void main string array args. Okay, so I'm gonna say SQLite util. Whoops. Util SQL to new SQLite util. So if SQL.connect, which basically if connection is successful, then we can use it. Oh, for one more thing, because we need to use this connection variable in order to make queries. So public get connection public connection get connection return connection. Okay, so if before we can actually connect, before we connect to it, because we're trying to use this example.db, we actually do need to create this file first. So we'll do that here. File is equal to new file example.db. And if not file.exists, so if file does not exist, try file.create new file, catch IO exception E. I'm just going to read a print stack trace and return. So that if it fails to create a new file, the thing doesn't continue. So this will create our example.db file, which we can then use here. Now I'm going to want to create so now it's really just a matter of knowing which execution methods to use when doing certain actions. So I'm going to go through, essentially, the ones you want to use for certain things. So for something like creating a table, when you're adding things to the database, you would use the prepared statements execute method, which returns a boolean. If you are just querying the database, like you're going to select the items from the database, for example, then you would use the execute query method, which returns a result set, because usually that's because you're retrieving things from the database. If you're going to update something, so this is like changing a database entry or updating like a table, adding say a row to a table, adding a new. It's like, say if you have like a user and you have the username and password and you're adding a name column to that, you'd use the update. So that when you call the execute update, that returns an integer result, which is 0 for executions that have no change, and then after that, I think it's the number of rows affected. So I'm gonna leave most of this up to your experimentation, but I'm gonna at least go through querying to create a table, to insert data, and to read data. So we're going to start by creating a table. So we're gonna go ahead and do prepared statement is equal to SQL.getConnection.prepare statement. Right, I have to put in SQL exception thing here. I'll do that in a second. Okay, so we're going to create table. Let's just call it users, say. So we have username be varchar 40. Name, set varchar 50. Email, varchar of 100. And say password, which would be varchar of maybe 200. Okay, so what I've written so far here, let me just add the try catch block, catch SQL exception e, system.error.println e.get message e.printStackTrace. Okay. So if you haven't seen SQL script before, which is what this basically is right here, this is a command that you could, if you're in phpMyAdmin and you're connected to the database via an SSH, you would run this kind of command to do things. This is sort of what the format follows. So what you're seeing here is, so I'm literally create table users. It's literally saying that I'm going to use the create command. What I'm creating is a table, and the table is going to be called users. And then in parentheses here, we're creating all of the different columns. We're creating a column username that is a variable type varchar, and in parentheses the length. So there are a lot of different kinds of things you can use. There's varchar, there's JSON, there's text, there's integers, there is doubles, which is variables, there's floating point numbers, which is longer decimals. I believe there is actually a format for decimals as well. Basically any type you can think of. So I could, for username and for password for email, have used text, but that would allow only letters to be entered, and it would not allow for symbols like the pound symbol or like a section sign or an ampersand. What using varchar is variable character, which means literally any kind of character you want. Now, when you're writing this out, there is nothing that separates. So between the column name and the column type, there's only a space to separate them. The casing of the type doesn't matter at all. I like to capitalize it, and most places you'll find the type capitalized like this. That makes it easier to distinguish what is a name and what is the type. So the type, for the name, you'd always see everything in lowercase and word separation with underscores, and then the type is capitalized. Most types will not have this parentheses and the number. Varchar is different because you can specify the size up to, varchar can go up to a length of 1500. Now the reason why I gave the password a length of 200 is if this was like an actual users table in a database, passwords are going to be encrypted. If they're not encrypted, you're doing it wrong. And that's very insecure. So you would encrypt your password, and encryptions can be very long. Like the maximum power encryption that you can use, like in a PHP script when you're working with passwords, is like 500 characters or something. It's very long. So I just put 200 there for that. And when you're creating a table, it's generally advisable to have a primary key. So I'm going to add one. Constraint users underscore pk primary key, and then in parentheses here what the primary key is going to be, which is actually, I would say email. Email would be the primary key. So this command here will create a table. If you're like in an SSH environment, or even in PHP in PHP MyAdmin with the SQL code editor, you'd usually put a semicolon at the end of this, but I'm not, because of the way I'm doing this. So once we've got this statement written, this is a great statement, we're going to go ahead and do Boolean result is equal to statement dot execute. Oops, it should be one equal sign. So system out dot print ln result. So create result. So this will give us the result of true the first time. If I were to run this script a second time, which I will, this we'll see is going to come up with false, and then the next stuff is going to error out. So after we've created, we've done that, I'm going to go ahead and create another statement. This is going to be SQL dot statement is equal to SQL dot get connection dot prepare statement. So this is going to be an insert statement. So insert into users values, and then in parentheses we're adding all the values that we're going to put in. So I'm going to put in wisp the fox, wisp yeah, I'll do that. Wisp read well, wisp at email.com, and then password. I'm not going to bother with trying to encrypt it because I don't really need to. You'll notice here that I put in each item that I'm giving in single quotes. This is to indicate that. So if you just put in text, it'll sometimes work. But this is is safer because it will identify. The database engine will identify that is a string of characters and nothing else. So an insert is the same. So Boolean, I can just call result is equal to statement dot execute, and because I want to put in, so I'll leave that now. We've put this one result in. So just insert result. Okay, and now we'll go and query the database. Actually, I'll add in a second user. Camel case. Camel case with Speedwell. Yeah, so I'll add in two users, just confirming if it worked. And now I'm going to query this. So I'm going to select all these items. So statement is equal to SQL dot get connection dot prepare statement. Select. So this the way select works is interesting. So you can either do something like select all, which is use a star to indicate that, or you can select individual items. So you could say select. Say I wanted to just get the names, so I could do select name from users or if you want to get a specific row, you can say where name is equal to. You could do like select all from users where name is equal to Wisp readwell. It would give you just my entry. It would give you just the one section. It would give you the one result if one does exist. So I'm gonna just do first. We'll do select all. So select all. Select star from users. And if I do, now this is going to come in a result set. Types result set results is equal to statement dot, and we're going to call it execute query with this one. Now, if I want to look at the result set, this is going to require a loop. So I'm going to go ahead and just print this out. Query results, and so I'm going to do this with a while loop. So while results dot next. I'm going to go system dot out dot print ln. So this is where things get interesting. If I've done this query to get a single row, or I've done this query to get multiple rows, when I run results.next, it's going to put, like when I call the retrieve, the get string, get number methods on the different, on result, it's going to give me whatever is the next item in the list. So it's calling .next, which pulls the first item up to the front for me to use with. When it runs it again, it'll go to the next item. So it should print. So if I get the name, we will see Wisp readwell, and then camel case should be displayed. So I'm going to call the results.get. So as you can see, there are a lot of different things we can retrieve from here. So we've got strings, we can get arrays, we can get ASCII streams, we can get big decimals. We've got binary streams, blobs, booleans, bytes, character streams, clob, concurrency, cursor name. There's a lot of different stuff: dates, doubles, floats, ints, longs, even just objects if you've got nothing. So basically, depending on what the type is of that column in the table, you're going to be retrieving based on that type. So like if you made the type a JSON or something, you're going to get a string. Or if you put in a varchar or text, you're going to get a string. If you put in numbers, you can get them as strings, I think. I don't know if it'll actually error out, but it's best to get that as the number type. So since I've put in only strings here, I'm doing get string, and we pass in the name of the column. So the column is called name. So we're printing out the name column. If I wanted to print out every single column, I would have to individually call get string for each of the different columns. So I'd have to print on another line username, on another line email, on another line password. Yeah. So, now that we've got all this code here, I'll go ahead and compile this. And I'll run it. So, lifecycle. Okay. So, let me go ahead and... Oh, whoops. That was supposed to be put into the Java folder. I'll move it later. So we want this one here, this jar with dependencies. I'm just gonna run it right here. So let me copy that and cmd. So it's gonna be f:. Got a mount f cd general project slash SQL guide slash target. Whoops. There we go. Java jar. Okay. I don't know why it said false for those first two, because clearly they weren't false. Java JDBC prepared statement. This would be execute if database access error occurs. So if is closed, called in a closed prepared statement, or an argument is supplied to this method. True if the first result is a result set object. False if the first result is an update count or there is no result. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so I actually was using that wrong. I did not realize that result is the Boolean is only true if it's a result set. Well, so what I did here with these booleans is actually not right. I don't know, it's a weird use of booleans. It says here, I'll just pull this over here, actually the documentation that I have open right here. True if the first result is a result set object. False if the result is an update count or there is no result, which is interesting. Well, basically, the code that I wrote here did work for all of these. So, there's another... What's always useful to do... DB... I gotta download this. It's always a good idea to actually look at the database app when, like, you're finished setting it up. So, DB... browser for... So, I've got a... But so it created the database in this example.db file. You can't just like open that with a text viewer or anything. You need a tool to read that. Like if I double click on this, I don't have anything to actually open this with right here, so I need to download a tool. I like to use this tool here, which for some reason I don't have downloaded, so I'm gonna get the zip file version. I'm just going to grab this and drag it to the desktop. I'll leave it here for now. I'll move it in my documents folder a little bit later. So now if I you can create databases with this as well. So if I'm going to pop this open and we browse data, we can see that there's just this one table, and you can see that the items that are in the table. So it did successfully create the table. I just had it reading the booleans wrong. But yeah, now one thing that I forgot to do actually, was close this. So I need to call SQL.close when I'm done. Because if I try to go back to this, a good example is actually if I try to run this again, so we're getting an error that the users table already exists. I think it did close the connection when the program finished, but like if the program was still running and I made some changes to the database, and then I needed to make more changes, and the connection was still open, or if I was making changes from another thread, it would fail. So you call that closed method. That's definitely important. But yeah, that's the basics of using SQLite. It's pretty easy. You just need to add the dependencies to your project, really, and know how to set up a connection correctly. It's not that difficult, really. And then like MySQL is very similar. All you basically just change, like you pretty much just change these two lines here, and everything else is going to be the same. But you do need to add a different dependency for that. But we'll get into that in the next episode, which is going to be on MySQL.